What you guys are about to see right now is a video clip of a cut I had when I was at a friend's cottage in August. Basically, I was at a beach with a couple of friends kayaking and canoeing when I decided to go into the water to check it out and basically cut my second toe on what was known as a zebra mussel. It's like a huge sharp clam that really cut up my toe for a week now, and it still hasn't healed. I had to immediately go to the ER, the emergency room, and get 5 stitches on that one toe of mine, and it hurt like hell. And even right now, I can't really walk, or, I'm just still limping around. And I always tell everyone now to please wear shoes when they go to any beach or any cottage or any lake that's in the water because, you know, I thought I was invincible and this happened to me. And I wouldn't say it ruined my August or ruined my summer, but definitely put a dent in it. But it'll be something that I'll always remember, and it's a good lesson learned, to be honest. Hopefully you won't have to go through the same thing, but luckily it wasn't too bad of a lesson. At least my toe wasn't cut off. But yeah, it's still healing right now, and hopefully by the time this video comes out, the stitches would have been removed, and yeah, I'll have a great rest of the summer, and for you guys as well. So without further ado, grab a blanket, turn off your lights. For true scary horror stories, ghost stories, that happened in August. What is your worst story that happened in August? Put in the comments below. This is definitely, I wouldn't say the worst, but it's quite memorable.
Creepy experience at the hospital. I was visiting my brother at the hospital late August last year. His room was on the ground floor, and it was the second last room in that corridor. There was a fire escape at that end and no rooms across the corridor. All the rooms had big glass windows facing out towards the corridor, so you could see who was in that room, etc. I was visiting alone, and I sat down on a chair facing the window so that other people visiting him would see me and know that it was his room, and because the chair was already there. He told me that his girlfriend and her mom were coming in about an hour, and to keep an eye out for them as he was going to fall asleep. About 10 minutes later, I saw his girlfriend and his mom walk past. I did think it was strange that they were here early, but as the hospital wasn't far from her house, I didn't think much of it. As they were walking past, his girlfriend looked straight at me, smiled, and continued to walk with her mom. I quickly texted her to see if she got the wrong room, but she told me that she was still at her house and was doing her makeup. I thought she was playing a trick on me, so I called a nurse in to wait with my brother as I went to go and find her. The room next to us was empty. Nobody in the bed, no people, and the door was locked. The only possible way out was through the fire escape, and it set off an alarm if you opened it, and an alarm certainly didn't go off. I was confused, but put it down to my mind playing tricks on me. When his girlfriend and mom did arrive, they were wearing the exact same clothes as the other people were. Her mom was wearing a shirt she had designed herself, and there was only one of it in the whole world. I didn't tell either of them or my brother about what I saw, and I went to the shop beside the hospital to get myself a drink and some mints. When I was walking back, I saw his girlfriend and her mom again. I said hi, but they didn't say anything back. I put it down to them not hearing me and went back to my brother's room. But who did I see then? His girlfriend and her friggin' mom, sitting down and talking to my brother. There was no way in hell that they could have gone back before me. The Thing on a Bridge. I live in the rural town of Port Hedland, Western Australia, and this is what happened on my walk. It was 2 Saturdays ago, on the 12th of August. I was walking alone at about 5:30 in the afternoon. I would normally have been walking my dog Charlie at this time, but she'd had an eye infection that kept her from sleeping and didn't seem up to the exercise. Port Hedland is a coastal town near the northern end of Australia and is prone to heavy rain from cyclones. The annual torrents require an extensive system of ditches running through the town to drain water off the roads. There also tends to be a lot of empty land between blocks of houses, massively overgrown with weeds that are only occasionally burned or trimmed away by the council. I was walking along a narrow concrete bridge when I heard heavy breathing from the ditch below me. First, I thought it was a drunk. Then I remembered the time I was jogging through a park, with my dog this time, and realized that I was running straight towards a large, feral-looking mongrel dog, who was poking out of the yellow scrub and baring more and more teeth as I approached. We forget how close we are to nature. I hurried along the bridge and looked under it after retreating to a respectable distance. There was nothing there. More relaxed and curious now, I walked back onto the bridge to ponder the origin of the sound. It promptly resumed. This time, I boldly leaned over the railing and looked right under the bridge. Again, I saw nothing more suspicious than empty faded beer cans. I strained up, and stinking hot breath blew in my ear. It was fear that I felt. Pure fear. Using some fancier word could only cheapen the experience. I fell back, facing the source of the breath. There was nothing I could see, but the heavy panting continued, and I was well familiar with that raw flesh smell, unique to the breath of a dog on a bloody diet. Before I'd even realized I should be getting up, there was a sudden invisible pressure on my chest. I expected paws, but did not quite feel them. Even now, I can't discern the shape of the force that held me, whether I was restrained by paws, claws, hands, or a flat slate. A vicious howling erupted in front of me. Thoughts of the dog filled my mind, until I couldn't even see where I really was. That killer mongrel peeking his nose out of the bush, coolly deciding how close he would allow me to come before he lunged. Unable to think straight, I imagined that this was what was supposed to have happened, that I had fluked my way out of some cosmic depth, and now the collector was knocking. Then it was gone. I didn't move for some time. I wanted to go back there. It took me 4 days to get the nerve to actually do so, but I knew I wanted to go back. I thought about it for a while and decided everything needed to be the same. I arrived at the bridge at 5:30 the next Wednesday, walked to the center, and waited. After minutes of nothing, I realized what had drawn the thing to me. I began to picture the dog once more, remembered the lip pulling back and stained points behind. As nothing continued to happen, I realized what was different from the first time. The memory no longer scared me. I thought about this and realized a few things. The first time I crossed the bridge, something, not a ghost in usual terms, I have no reason to believe it was ever human, created the breathing sound that I was free to ignore or interpret however I wished. It was only after I returned that the breath resembled a dog's. I think the thing offered me a chance to show what I feared, and I did. I can think of two reasons why it acted as it did. Perhaps it wanted to help me exorcise my demons, so to speak, or in some way, it wanted my fear for its own reasons. We forget how close we are to nature, but maybe some parts of nature needs us a little closer. My haunted house's lost children. I never believed in spirits before, until I saw my first one on the day of August 17th, 2003. At the time, I was living in Millen, GA with my parents and brother. I found out that I wasn't the only person seeing these spirits in my house. As a matter of fact, everyone but my father was seeing the same spirit. She was a little girl, no more than 4 feet high. She was wearing an old-style dress. You know, the ones on a Little House on the Prairie? She was always skipping and singing. She would go throughout the house and just watch us. After a while, I noticed that she would go to my parents' door and disappear. I was wondering why that was, so I crawled under the house and went to the approximate location of the doorway, and I started looking around. I found nothing, so I thought that maybe I was just crazy. After that day, however, the little girl turned mean. She would throw things at me, wake me up in the middle of the night, By screaming at the top of her lungs, she would come into my room and just completely destroy the place. Needless to say, I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do. My mother told me that the girl was clearly angry with me, so I should try to speak to her to see what she wants. So I did. On the night of June 8, 2004, I was awakened by the little girl. She was standing in my doorway just staring at me after I awoke. I looked at her with a shaky voice. I asked her what she wanted. She looked at me and said she wanted to leave. I told her she was free to go, and she said that she wasn't. She wouldn't tell me why. But she did tell me why she had directed so much anger towards me. I found out that my parents' room used to be a room that would lead down to the cellar, and it was her favorite room. It angered her that I would go and investigate it. The little girl never left the house as far as I know. Last I heard, the old house was demolished in 2010. The one other spirit I had seen was a little boy. Although I'd only seen him once, he will remain with me for the rest of my days. I was in bed and I heard something tap my window. I looked outside and saw this little boy standing there. I looked into his eyes. That's what's been haunting me for so long, his gray, soulless eyes. He looked at me and asked me to direct him to Perkins, which was a town a few miles away. This struck me as odd, but I pointed him in the right direction. As he walked away, I saw a large blood patch on his back on the right side. I asked him if he was okay, and he said that he'll never feel pain again. The next day in the newspaper, I found an article about a little boy who got lost and was found miles away from his home in Perkins, GA, with a bullet in his back. I never saw the boy again. I am currently in the army and deployed to Afghanistan, but I'm more afraid of that old house than I am getting shot out here. There's something really bad in my friend's new house. My best friend of the last 20 years got married in August, and him and his wife bought their first home last month and just started moving in a couple days ago. Of course, I am glad to help, and he has a lot of stuff, but he can't afford to pay movers since the old house they lived in hasn't sold yet. So it's pretty much me and him, and sometimes his dad and brother, helping him move stuff in. The first day we started moving stuff, it was Friday night. We didn't get much done, but it was a start. I was just going to drive home and come back in the morning, but it's a 40-minute drive there, and another 40 minutes back to his new place. So he just said, why not sleep on the couch? Which was one of the first things we brought in. They have electricity, but nothing is hooked up yet. His wife suggested we go eat, come back, and knock out, then get up early to continue unloading. So we went and had hibachi, and came right back, and I immediately noticed that some of the lights that were off were turned back on. I didn't say anything since I was not 100% sure. We come into the house and everyone showers, drinks a beer, and then heads to bed. So I am laying there on the couch, trying to sleep, and it gets really cold. So I get up and start fumbling in the hall closest for a blanket, when I very distinctly hear footsteps in the attic. There's a 2-story house with a basement as well, and very nice too. My buddy and his wife are both geologists, so I pause and go, still trying to listen. It was unmistakable. I clearly hear footsteps. Then my friend's wife, who I've known for 3 years, scares the shit out of me by walking out of their room because she heard it too. She's like, oh, thank God it's just you. And I put my finger to my lips and point up and tell her to listen. And then she hears it too. So she goes to wake up hubby, and by the time he wakes up it had stopped. She and I are a little freaked out, but not too much, since it could have been some kind of animal on the roof, like a raccoon or something. So, the next morning we bust our asses all day, but there's just me and him unloading and her unboxing, so it's slow going. We were not even halfway done emptying the moving van, so he calls his dad and brother, but they can't come over until the next day on Sunday. We finally stop around 8 p.m., and he says if I can stay the night again, me, him, and his dad and brother can all knock it out then. So I agree to stay over again. Now, at this point, his wife has everything electric plugged in, so we can actually play games, watch TV, whatever. He says he's going to go shower, so I ask him if it's cool I play a game or something. He says yeah, and I put in Madden and start up a game. I can see the light from the kitchen, and it was putting a pretty bad glare on the screen, but I was too lazy to go turn it off, and as I am waiting for the game to load, the screen goes black for a bit before it gets into the game, and I swear to God, I saw a tall, thin black figure blocking out the light. I spun around and there wasn't anything there. This freaked me out, so I started calling for Misty, my friend's wife, because I know he is in the shower, and she comes out of their bedroom, and I told her I don't mean to freak them out, but I saw something. She said she had been feeling weird in the house too. She just didn't want to say anything. In fact, she said she didn't want the house, but my friend loved it. So he comes out and asks what all the loud voices were about, and we're like, what voices? And at that exact moment, the light in the hallway starts to flicker, and the floorboards start creaking about 6 feet in front of this. And he's like, screw this, we are out. We go outside and talk about what happened and what we all have seen and felt. I tell him I will stay if he wants me to, but the house feels wrong, and they agree they don't feel comfortable at all. As we are standing outside, one of the upstairs lights comes on by itself, and that pretty much did it for them. They went and stayed with his dad that night, and I drove home. They have not been back there in 3 days, and I don't know what they're going to do. All his money is tied up in that house, and his old house hasn't even sold yet. It may not sound like much, but it was very unmistakable what was going on. I feel bad for them. This is no way to start a new life with someone. Update. Okay, so his dad was very adamant that we were all suffering from exhaustion, carbon monoxide gas, power lines, and you name it. Told my friend he was extremely disappointed in him for buying into his wife's fears and that he never trusted me. First I ever heard this, because of past drug problems. His brother pretty much will side with his dad on anything, so tonight they were going to finish moving in, and he asked me if I was coming. I'll do it, but I told him if they are staying there, they need to figure out what's going on, because when I walk into that place, I am instantly on edge and feel like someone is watching me. His wife argued with him and wants him to try to back out, but he said no. They both got jobs at the same place, working the same schedule, and can drive one car back and forth to their jobs. He said it's too good to pass up or let go, and they will just have to deal with it until he figures things out. I am meeting up with them in an hour and a half. Part of me hopes something happens so his dad can see we are not crazy. My friend says he only ever heard voices, and that it was me and Misty talking about we were whispering, not even talking that loud. Everything else he just blew off as the house being old, recently renovated, and bad wiring. That's his dad talking, I know it. His dad is like a really manly hunter-gatherer, cigar-chomping ex-military type, so he calls it all bullshit, right? And I'm sorry to say his brother is just a wimpier version of him, a little yes-man. I'm dreading going back there. Update 2. Well, all of his stuff is moved in. Nothing seemed to happen during the day, but as soon as it got dark, we all felt the atmosphere of the place change. We heard knocking, scratching, breathing, whispering. It was way worse after dark. Misty was so nervous she was shaking, and Jay's dad basically acted like she was trying to get out of working. Even Brian, Jay's brother, admitted that something was off about the place. Don, Jay's dad, had made up every excuse in the world for the uncomfortable atmosphere, even going so far as to say, if there was a ghost, it should stop being a pussy and show itself if it was really there. When he said that, there was a massive thud from under the wooden floorboards in the same hallway where we heard the creaking before. We all jumped, even Jay's dad, and I was like, okay, come on, you have to admit there is something here. But he's a stubborn old ass who is pressuring Jay to man up and stay in the house. Even Brian tried to say he thinks they should not stay there. But all Don seems to be able to do is call people pussy and put others down. But he sure as hell took off out of there as soon as the moving was done. Jay asked me to stay another night, but honestly I was too afraid. I'm sorry, they're having to deal with this, but I don't know what else I can do. As I was standing in the doorway saying goodbye, Jay was standing with his arms crossed, and I was holding the screen door. Suddenly, the actual front door slowly started closing by itself. right before Jay stopped it, as if someone was trying to speed me on my way. I said, "Dude, you cannot stay here. It isn't just the noises, it's the feel of the place. Just very oppressive and heavy and depressing. And everyone seems so tired and drained all the time." As soon as I drove away, I instantly felt better physically. But emotionally, I am really concerned for my friends. The Black Smoke. Well, my story begins with me coming back home from Las Vegas about 3 months ago around August 2012. I had unpacked and started to relax by watching some TV in the living room. I had fallen asleep while watching the TV when I woke up from my sleep to see this thick, really dark black smoke. I had never seen anything so black, but yet I could tell it was smoke. It seemed somewhat contained and had a circumference of a circle. It hovered above my TV and appeared to be watching me. I remember just looking at it for what might have been like 5 seconds, moving my head as I watched it from different angles, when all of a sudden, it all started to come together to a center, like the smoke was being sucked into a small hole and then disappeared. I've experienced things all throughout my life, so I wasn't really scared. I didn't feel anything negative or positive. I don't really know what to make of it, whether it's a ghost, demon, or what it means. It's a new house too, so I know that no one has died here. However, the cemetery is like a 10 or 15-minute walk from my house. I'm not sure if that means anything, or is it something that followed me because as early as I can remember, I have experienced things. I've shared a story previous to this one that shares all the things I've seen thus far. If anyone has any advice or has experienced this, please let me know. I've tried searching online for any information about what I have seen, but I have yet to find anything to help me. This house feels like a tomb. To give a little background information on the house where I lived up until last April, right after graduating high school in 2005, I moved out of my mother's house and into my father's house. They had been divorced since I was 10 years old, which is also the house where my grandparents lived, on my father's side. It was built by my grandfather and his dad, my great-grandfather. Not sure what year, but I could find out. Along with 2 bedrooms upstairs, a living room, kitchen, and 1 bathroom. There was also a good-sized den downstairs and another bathroom, as well as a room with a pool table, our boiler storage room, and off of that, my grandmother's sewing room. Attached to a lower level is a huge 3-car garage that served at my grandfather's machine shop. He taught my dad the trade, so when he passed away after my grandmother, the logical choice was to have my father buy out my aunt and uncle so that he could own the house and the attached business, which he had been running now by himself since the early 2000s. Anyways, after both of my grandparents passed, my dad remarried to a woman who had 3 kids. Shortly after they moved in, I was living out of state with my mother and came on weekends to visit. My stepmother started claiming that weird things were happening in the house when my father was downstairs working and she was upstairs alone. During the day when all of the kids were at school, she said she would be in the kitchen and hear the bedroom doors creak open and close firmly all by themselves, though she never got a chance to see it visually with her own eyes. She also said that she always felt like there was a presence nearby, even though there was actually no one there. It was unsettling to her, but my father didn't have any experiences of his own to go off of, so he thought maybe she was just weirded out by the fact that both of my grandparents died in that house, right in the bedroom where her and my dad slept every night. Her kids thought something was off in the feeling of the house too, but it's easy to assume that kids with active imaginations and impressionable minds will feed off of their mother's paranoia. So everyone just tried to ignore it and go about their daily lives without thinking too much of it. When I moved back into that house, the same house where I had gone every day after school to be with my grandparents before my parents got off work, I could feel a significant change in how the house made me feel being inside of it. It used to feel crisp and refined and full of light from the windows. When I moved back, it felt like a dark cave. No matter how many lights you turned on or window shades you opened. Years later, someone said something to me about that house that hit the nail on the head and described what I hadn't been able to really pinpoint. It felt like a dark tomb. Even the air seemed extremely still, and somehow almost suffocating. I thought that maybe it was because of the deaths of my grandparents that the comforting feeling I used to get when I was there felt so completely lost. Then things got pretty weird and frankly, very scary for me to experience, even if the accounts don't sound drop dead terrifying through text. My dad got divorced in 2006 after just 3 years of marriage. It was a messy and sad divorce, and my stepmother and her kids moved out, obviously. One of the things they didn't take with them was a big screen TV that was out in the living room. It was an older model, not a flat screen, the tube kind, if that makes sense. Not long after they moved out, and it was just me and my dad, the TV would randomly turn itself on in the middle of the day or middle of the night, without anyone in the room. Several times, the TV remote was laying in plain sight exactly where I had left it the previous day. It would turn on and cycle through the channels. Not quickly, but maybe for a slow count of 30 seconds to a full minute. There didn't seem to be any rhythm or reason to how it would happen, because it would turn to seemingly random channels and not just ascend or descend in order. Channel 21, Channel 56, Channel 3, stuff like that. I always turned it off and pointed it out to my dad. One of the nights he was upstairs and around to see it for himself. He thought it was weird, but figured it was a problem with the wiring inside, maybe even an issue with the remote itself. Or possibly, my grandfather maybe once had a timer on it and that was the explanation. Thinking, it totally reasonable, I figured out how to check the timer and lo and behold, it wasn't set for anything. So to solve the problem, I unplugged the TV whenever I was going to use it because frankly, it was kind of creeping me out to have it happen a couple times a week. Around this time was also when I started to sense that feeling that my stepmother had talked about when she said she felt like she was being watched, or that I felt like a presence would suddenly come into the room and linger nearby. I would be doing something totally normal, even in broad daylight, and be overcome with a powerful sensation that there was something directly behind me, following me, as I went to the kitchen for something to eat or whatever. Again, I thought I was just being paranoid, and I really wanted to believe that it was just all my imagination, and a byproduct of living in the house where your grandparents had died, right? So I mostly ignored it, and that was good enough for me. Now, fast forward to August of 2008, when my boyfriend moved in. My father has always been really cool with me, and actually thought it was best for me to explore my new serious relationship on my terms in my own house, where I would have more control than saying, getting an apartment with my boyfriend right away. He has always wanted to look out for me, but has always given me plenty of space to make my own choices, so it worked out really well in that regard, since he was gone all the time anyway between working downstairs in the shop and going out to play gigs with his band. The house was basically at my disposal as my own. It was really comforting to have another person in the house more often than my father was. But before long, my boyfriend started to experience that creeping, powerful sensation of being watched and followed around the house. I didn't even mention it to him, anything about my experiences there or my stepmother's experiences, but he quickly started saying things like, man, I don't know why, but your house is creepy as hell. I don't even like walking down the hallway to the bathroom in the dark. He's the one who likened it to a dark crypt. No matter what attempts you made to let in light or get the air flowing. At this point, he knew nothing about my grandparents having died there. It's not the type of thing you tell someone when they first move into your house, you know? It seemed like after he moved in, things started to intensify a little bit. My mother's father died the year my boyfriend moved in, and my mother gave me his old television, which was much better than the one I had in my bedroom at the time. We were excited to hook up the N64 to play it, rather than use it to watch television. Well, before long, that set started to turn itself on and off as well, and switch through the channels exactly like the other TV had. Different make, different model, different remotes. It was unnerving, but I reasoned maybe somehow there were signals being crossed by a neighbor across the street, and it was just a quirky thing to deal with. Then a really messed up dream started happening. My boyfriend began screaming and pleading in his sleep while he was dreaming almost every single night, saying no, 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 and letting out a sound like terrified pain groans, loud enough to startle me awake. Apparently, this is not something he had knowledge of ever doing anywhere else, and since we moved, that stopped the first night we left. One of the most notable experiences he had was waking up in our bed. His spot was closest to the door, something I liked because it made me feel safer to be sandwiched between him and the wall for some reason. And he said that he was being pulled out of bed by something. His upper body and head were hanging off the side of the bed, but not hanging. It was rigid, like someone was holding him level with the mattress and not letting him flop down as a limp body would do. Completely freaked out, he tried to move his arms and realized that the sheets were trapped tightly around his chest and arms, forcing his arms into a cross position over his chest like a mummy. He tried to yell out to me and ask for help, but he found that for some reason he couldn't speak. Freaking out, he managed to lift his leg closest to me and hook it around my legs. As soon as he did that, he said that the sensation of being dragged out of bed immediately evaporated, and he was able to pull himself back into bed and unwrap the sheets from around him. He was pretty weirded out by it, because nothing like this has ever happened to him before, and combined with the odd presence feeling, the TV oddity, and his nightly screaming, it was understandably disturbing. It kind of reminded me of a dream I had experienced right before he moved in, where I had a dream that I was sitting at a long dinner table, like the Last Supper, though I'm not even slightly religious, nor do I believe in God, in a room with lots of windows. A lot of people were there, though I don't think I knew any of them personally. They were all mysterious to me. Suddenly, a bunch of multicolored orbs come filtering into the room through the windows, filling the space all around us, and bring with them an overwhelming sense of such deep peace and wholeness that I've never seen before or since then. In the dream, the orbs took me with them, and I became pure energy, flying like a blood cell through a vein, one tiny orb of light among a million more that were pure goodness and light. It was sort of like how they show the TARDIS on Doctor Who, traveling through time and space. Anyways, the dream took a dramatic and terrifying turn after that. I ended up in my bedroom and it was completely pitch dark, just enough natural light from the outside world to make the outline of my bedroom door visible. I was sitting in a wooden chair from the kitchen, facing the wall. Immediately next to my bedroom door, which was cracked open ominously, there were no lights on anywhere else in the house. I could tell by how completely impenetrable the blackness was. I looked down and suddenly I realized that I was naked in the chair, with my underwear down around my ankles and the bottoms of my feet pressed against the wall, with my knees bent towards my chest. In the way dreams have a way of doing, my brain filled in the blanks that I was like that because I had just been raped and placed there purposefully. I figured out why when I looked through the crack in the bedroom door and didn't see anything in that total darkness, but I could feel that overwhelming presence that had been bothering us, except it was magnified to 1,000. Now, I don't believe in demons, but this was what my brain was telling me. There was something completely evil, corrupted, and dumbfoundingly terrifying in that darkness, staring back at me, despite not seeing any eyes, watching me with perverse glee as if it was responsible for placing me in the chair, and it was happy to see me crying. That's when I woke up, and when I came to, I was standing in the hallway right outside of the bathroom door, facing it. I had been crying in my sleep because my face was wet with tears, something that has never happened to me that I can ever recall. The house was dark like in my dream, so I literally ran back to my room in a state of sheer panic, turned on all my lights, and didn't dare sleep until morning light had come and established itself as a full noon sun high in the sky. I tried to place it out of my mind, thinking that it was just an awful nightmare and that I would have to get over eventually, no matter how physically ill it made me feel just to think it over in my mind. It was like I couldn't get it out of my head, the feeling of being violated, the feeling of that tangible, evil darkness staring back at me through the crack in my bedroom door. So, after my boyfriend's weird experience getting yanked from the bed, things started getting very intense as far as the bad feeling went. It got to the point where I felt like there was an actual unseen predator living in the space of the house with us, and I could barely muster the courage to take a shower by myself, incredibly certain that something was always just about to draw back the shower curtain and expose its face to me. It got so bad and oppressive that neither one of us could go into the kitchen or the basement at night without someone else being present. Just to walk from one end of the house to the other, we would have to turn on every light along the way to feel slightly less freaked out. The worst part was never seeing anything visual, but that haunting, awful feeling of someone nearby, just around the corner, ready to come out and scare the ever-loving shit out of you. We both started to sink into a hard depression. It was difficult to care about anything, even though we were successful and happy with a lot of things to be thankful for. My dad actually wanted us to stay there to keep an eye on things while he spent almost every night at his girlfriend's house, because the house is on a major highway, and we've had a few break-ins in his machine shop and even some arson happened right next door. I was torn between staying and wanting to get the hell out of there ASAP so I could resume a normal life where I didn't feel like I was being hunted whenever I left my bedroom. A few other things happened there, more minor things. One time, a huge canister that had to have weighed over 200 pounds came off the wall in the shop where it had been resting for literally years, untouched, and crashed to the ground in front of one of my dad's employees, who was really puzzled by it. Another time, when we were in the kitchen at night, we heard an unexplainable hiss come out of the hallway, right where I had woken up from that nightmare, that seemed to start off loud and then travel down the hallway quickly, becoming more quiet as it went. We don't have radiators, there was no TV, no radio on, and we both instantly looked at each other in total, instinctive fear. And no, it wasn't a cat. Another time, a door leading up to the attic. Something never opened and always kept shut because it allows the heat in the house to escape rapidly, was wide open when I walked into the kitchen after being out of it for only a couple minutes. What my boyfriend pointed out was even weirder, was that there is some sort of vent directly above where I had woken up in the hallway from my nightmare that leads into the attic above. I know none of this is super scary to most people, but this feeling of a dark presence has haunted me for years living there. It made me feel like I was losing my mind, and it crippled my ability to feel even slightly relaxed and at home within my own dwellings. Right before we moved out, my boyfriend had another nightmare. He was standing at the top of the stairs leading into the basement and lower half of the house, and a shadow figure rushed up directly at him. He slammed the door shut, and every time he opened it, there was a brick wall with only a thin line of space between the slanted ceilings of the staircase and the top of the wall. For some reason, in his dream, he said he let out the most badass rage-filled Hulk scream ever, as if to confront the demon with his anger. In response, the presence threw a dead, burnt human body over the wall through the crack and at my boyfriend's feet. But then he woke up. All I can say is I am relieved to no longer live there, and to live 16 hours away instead in a different state. Whether these things can be logically explained or not, I feel like I have been able to rapidly awaken from beneath that oppressive, scary atmosphere, and I am no longer afraid to walk down the hallway at night to go to the bathroom, or stand in the kitchen and make a sandwich with no one else around. Those simple activities were just two of the very basic mundane things most people do without ever thinking twice, but for us, it was certainly a battle of willpower. I can still remember the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears whenever I was certain something was coiling its dark, dangerous claws around me from behind. College dorm experiences, large figure and discomfort at night. My best friend is off at college and is currently extremely freaked out because of several occurrences in her dorm room. I would classify both of us as skeptics, but with her reaction to this, we want to explore all possibilities. She lives in a brand new, as in finished just in time to move in August, apartment complex that is part of university housing. Both her and her roommate started feeling uneasy in their room at times about a month into school. She occasionally wakes up feeling really uncomfortable and prays a rosary whenever this happens because she's too nervous to fall back asleep. 1 month ago, she woke up from a very bad dream to see a very large opaque black figure standing at the foot of her bed with very broad shoulders. She said she couldn't see ahead. It really freaked her out, and when she talked to her roommate about it the next morning, her roommate admitted to seeing what sounds like the exact same thing at around the same time. They both have alarm clocks with the time in view of their beds, the broad shoulders, location, darkness. Her roommate thinks that the head was bowed, which explains why my friend couldn't see it from her angle. Both had the same uncomfortable feelings and chills, and it took them a while to fall back asleep that night. 2 nights ago, she felt something rub her side and says she couldn't fall asleep because something didn't feel right, and her roommate was up again with the same feelings, like something was in their room. My friend has mild anxiety in stressful situations, and I've read about lucid dreams and sleep paralysis. The thing that is a red flag to me is that her roommate has parallel experiences, which is very strange. There's always a possibility, of course, that they both have strange dreams, and the power of suggestion has led them to believe that they're sharing experiences. They're both not the kind of people that would exaggerate about something like this, though. I had a lovely dream. I want to believe it was a real experience. My grandmother died in August of 2013 from complications stemming from a mitral valve prolapse. I didn't keep in touch with her the way I should have, but I've been trying to do better in the last few months before her passing. I have really taken her death quite hard. I'm a hospice CNA, and I've lost other family members as well, and death is a part of my life, more so than other people perhaps. Yet my Nana's loss is kind of this huge space that I can't seem to get around. Last weekend, I married my husband after a 3-year engagement. I now live in the same town where my mother's whole family lives, so my Nana's absence was keenly felt, and it was hard without seeing her there. She had met my fiancé only once, but in a mildly racist southern family, she had spent a lot of time defending our interracial relationship. The other night, on our honeymoon, I had a dream that my Nana called me on my cell phone. I don't remember any details about the dream. It faded so fast after I woke up, but it felt real enough to write it down when I woke up. In the dream, my Nana said she had to talk to me, and it was the only way she could do it. She said the usual stuff about how much she loved me, and then that she was always with me. I don't remember how the dream ended, but I remember asking her to come to me again, even if I wouldn't remember it. That seemed to be a rule or something. I woke up excited. I told my husband, I called my mom. I felt so warm and loved when I woke up. I really felt like we had a conversation, I don't believe in woo spooky stuff, and I never have. I'm the first person to roll my eyes at my coworkers when they talk about call lights going off in an unoccupied room or whatever. When beloved patients die, or even when my grandfather died, I never had any experiences, anything like this, where they came to talk to me or anything. But I'm 99% sure this stems from feeling guilty about not staying in touch with my Nana the way I should have, or missing her, or even something I read or saw before going to bed. I guess I just am hoping someone has had a similar experience, or something. I want to believe this could have been real.